Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Something about Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It has 19 letters, और जो जहन्नम के फरिश्ते होंगे वो भी 19 हैं. So go back and read Surah Mudassar. That's actually tallies with Bismillah ar-Rahman. Anyway, without further ado, first of all, thank you so much to the Family Physician Academy and also to the audiences and the management committee. Before we go ahead, I would really like to welcome our great... You see, I've now been given a message to finish off in 15 minutes, so okay, it's all done. Thank you so much. Anyway, it's wonderful to have Dr. Riaz Malik, originally from Manchester, but now he is, mashallah, half Arabic and half, well, 25% Pakistan and 25% England. So lovely to have you here, Dr. Riaz Malik. I've been given a difficult task, but I'll try to make it within actually it was said 20 minutes, but I'll try and finish it off in 15 minutes. So we're going to race you through the previous histories and to take you where we stand today. So welcome to the diabetes seminar. I've got the honor of actually breaking the ice to be the first person to actually deliver the talk. So thank you, Dr. Aftab, Iqbal Sheikh, and the management committee. Diabetes. It's a glance at the past and a look to the future. Gluco-centric versus cardio-centric or both. And that's a little token of my introduction. I was actually trained in England. At the moment, as I already said, I'm in Hamid Latif Hospital. Just to race you through what is the current data on that one. Do we have the caller mic, by the way? Okay, 1 in 11, but I don't think this figure is true when we actually giving a talk in this part of the world. I think it is perhaps a little more, but variable with the areas the patient comes from. So this is the updated diabetes facts and the figures. I don't have to really read it. Adults with diabetes live in the low and the middle income countries. So I think this is the biggest threat when you are actually coming to talk about diabetes and its management. So we really have to look into the pocket of the patient before we go ahead with the management. And I'll take you along to tell you that what is the simplest way of doing and when and how to do it. This is a horrendous figure. 2021, diabetes killed 5.7. But the question is, could it be prevented? You actually heard a wonderful lecture by the neurologist here, and I think very strongly I would approve if you take the message home and do it practically. I think maybe most of the stroke patients could actually be prevented just because many of them would be actually having a uncontrolled diabetes and the other cofactors. There is no doubt it is a living hell, but when we talk about the heart, which is the commonest cause of death in the patients with the diabetes, and if they have the renal involvement, the matter gets worse, and the bar for the cardiovascular disease gets high. So do you know your enemy? So it's not really true when it comes to Pakistan, but it's generally over there. So I think you have to figure out when you're talking about diabetes, who is actually your enemy. So do you know who is the enemy in diabetes? It's sugar. So the higher the HbA1c, it's a linear graph. The higher the HbA1c goes out, the risk for the cardiovascular disease and the stroke and all the vascular elements actually gets higher. And without saying, the heart obviously gets involved as a first threat. So if you dissect the number of the trials, because of the limitation of the time, I will just race through the important messages. So I will not go into the detail. But if you go through the glycemic toxicity and lesson from the history, it's a very basic fundamental equation. Hyperglycemia plus time is equal to complication. So the message it is giving is that if you are diagnosed today and you do not take care of yourself, you're totally asymptomatic, if you multiply with the years to years to years, you're going to end up in complication. So the message here is the day you are actually diagnosed with the diabetes, I think it is important that you roll up your sleeve, put your nose into it, and then do the utmost efforts to control your hyperglycemia. And that is the most important message, that time is important when we're talking about the diabetes and even the cofactors as well. There is a challenging conventional wisdom here. How many of you think all the diabetes are cardiovascular risk equivalent? We would like to take Dr. Riaz Malik comments on that at the end of the day. I don't know how many of you think, this is generally said that all the patients basically cardiovascular risk equivalent. But I don't think so that is really true. Because if somebody is something like 32 years of age and has a diabetes for 2 years, with no other cofactors, no smoking, no blood pressure, I don't think so this guy is at that point in time, if he keeps his blood sugar under control, would be cardiovascular risk equivalent. But overall, the time risk is high. There's no doubt about it, generally. It's generally said if you have a diabetes, say, for about 10 years, and a person is about 46 years of age, he will perhaps have 6 years of cut down in his lifespan. So the point is the duration of diabetes is important, and early control, it matters a lot. Picture worth 1,000 words. That is what is the killer of almost about 70 to 80% of the patients when they talk about the cardiovascular event. It is basically exposed to the high glucose levels all the time, 24 hours a day. Plus, if you have the kidney involvement, especially if you start off with the microalbuminuria to the proteinuria, and your bar for the cardiovascular events actually get higher. So the message here is, if you are looking into the diabetic patient, it doesn't matter what duration he has, but you must look into his urine examination to see if he's spilling protein into the urine. And if he has, you basically have a high-risk patient there. So that's the other message. Defining moments in the history of diabetes, it's going to take you back to 1960s. This is for the hypertensive drugs which came out, and then if you can see right at the bottom, the sulfonylureas. Right in the 1960s. When I was going to give a talk, some of the colleagues at the pharma industry said, oh, you're going to give a talk on sulfonylureas. That's the story of the old. But I'll give you a different spin to, well, the time is short, but I'll try to race you through with the salient features to say, it's not really quite the story of the past. It still has a place, and I'll try and convince you. So these are the modalities we have available at this moment, and I think the slide is self-explanatory, and you can see that there are multiple factorial hypoglycemic agents which are actually in the market at the moment. But we are going to be focusing today, the old is gold, and the gold is very expensive these days because the dollar has gone up. I think Riaz Malik will know that, or maybe Javed Akram is not here. I think he's the minister now, so anyway. I think it is extremely important when you see it's an individualized thing. You have to really see the smart selection of the patient. It's not just the blood sugar level which you actually have to keep in mind. You have to see the lot of other things like other cofactors and all. So it's a smart selection of the treatment based on patient characteristics. And decision must be driven based on the cost consideration. The reason I'm sharing it with you is because we do come from a low-income area, and the financial crisis at this moment globally, but worse in this part of the world, so we have to really look into the pocket of the patient, how much he can afford. That's extremely important. So treating diabetes with sulfonylurea, where we are in 2023. Are all the sulfonylureas just the same? Or within the class there is a difference? I think there is a definite difference within the class of sulfonylurea. And just to remind you, if you have gone through the ACCORD trial, the story goes between the rosiglitazone versus pioglitazone. So the trial which basically brought it down was the ACCORD trial and proactive, and the pioglitazone is still available in the market, where the rosiglitazone has been taken off. So it stands true for the sulfonylureas as well. So the benefits of the gluco-centric is the most important. If you have initially started off with diabetes, you just control your blood sugar level. And I personally think that in the initial phases, when you are starting with the glucose control, perhaps you don't need that much of a cardiorenal involvement, because the patients have just glycemic toxicity at this point. So the new AD and EST consensus report supports sulfonylurea and saying, there you are. So it is having the glucose lowering effects is the most, and the advantage of being imposed as accessible. So the clinical outcome success will be starting from glucocentric to cardio-centric and then the renal protection. The message here is, if your glucose is not under control, nothing is going to be working. I think there is a point at certain group of the organization have said that you start off with the SGLT2 and others right in the beginning. But my point is, nothing goes on if the person is diabetic and you have his glucose under control. So the sulfonylurea's pharmacodynamics is, it actually blocks the KTP channel, and then it actually holds down the efflux of the potassium, and then the membrane depolarization, which leads to the calcium influx, and that basically gives you the exostasis of the insulin cells within the beta cells, and then the insulin is produced. That's how the beta cell basically works. UKPDS, that's where I was trained, and that's where the Oxford basically has the top of the line. It was started in 1977. It's a large benchmark study on the, and it still holds true, a lot of its findings. And the question it was, would be approaching near normal glycemia be beneficial? So what they looked into the UKPD study was all the patients were newly diagnosed diabetic. And all they looked into it was if you bring the HbA1c down, there was no number to treat. If you bring it slowly down, they thought there will be benefit about it. So bearing this thing in mind, they thought that they will hold the trials, which primarily was to bring the glucose level, HbA1c, as much as close to normal levels. And so there was the 3 trials which came out: advanced trial, VADT, and Accord trial. And this is what it was. So the HbA1c was 7.2 to the target was 6.5, VADT was 9.4 to 6.9, Accord 8 to 6.4. And then it went on to the advance on. All these trials asking just one question: glycemic control, how intensive, and impact on CV events, which is the true, which is basically is what we are looking at: glycemic control, glucocentric, and then the cardiocentric approach. Why glycoside MR was chosen for advanced trial and not any other sulfonylureas? I don't know how many of you know about the preconditioning. In Quran it says, "Laqad khalaqna al-insana fi ahsani taqweem." मैंने तुम्हें बेहतरीन मोड में पैदा किया है. And that basically tells you this: if you have a repeated insult to your cardiovascular system or myocytes, Allah basically has an adaptability of actually, once you have ischemic heart disease, you get the adaptability of not getting any further myocardial infarction, generally speaking. So when you use the sulfonylureas, this is what basically brought, by and large, the sulfonylureas down, that they will not actually give you the ischemic preconditioning help. But the glycoside had a unique property that the preconditioning, this is what it happens. If you have an MI, you can see that's the infarct here. But if you use the sulfonylureas, which is basically helping you the preconditioning, you can see the infarct size is small. And this is when you're using the other sulfonylurea. It does not block actually the cardiomyocytic KTP channels. So important difference between glycoside MR and early sulfonylureas is this. This is a very important article, Journal of Metabolism, August 2020, and I'll just show you here that glycoside MRI obviously acts on to the pancreatic KTP channels, but it does not actually affect on the heart. So that is the dividing part between the other sulfonylureas and so this is basically is a cardio-friendly sulfonylureas, and I think that is the most important thing. And that was the reason, an impressive reason to conduct advanced trial with the glycoside. I think in the background, this was the main reason, because everybody knew that the sulfonylureas basically was not cardiac friendly, and behind there was another trial. I'll go through the evidence basically tell you. So when they looked into the Accord Advanced VADT trial, you can see from this thing, when you move from the standard control to the intensive control, the one thing which is extremely important and obvious is instead of actually getting the cardiovascular mortality either neutral or down, in a cord trial, the mortality actually went up, and the trial was actually stopped prematurely. So why increase mortality in a cord and not in advanced trial? That is a big question. They both were bringing the HbA1c very close, but the question was why it was stopped. There must be many reasons about it, but one of the few, this is the glucose control in a cord. On the top line, you got the standard line, which is basically is when they kicked off, and that is very close to about 6.3, 6.4. Okay, just another 3 minutes. Actually, I was given 20 minutes, but anyway, okay, anyway. So you can see the insulin, there was about sulfonylurea 74% used there. So 86% used sulfonylurea, mostly repliclide or glimepiride in intense arm, and the trial was stopped prematurely. HbA1c achieved was 6.4. So bearing in mind the glucose control in advanced trial was exactly the same. You can see this was the beginning of the HbA1c, and then about 91% of the patients actually used the glycoside. So the glycoside MR-based therapy dropped the HbA1 in a very gentle way and no significant weight gain or less hyper. Here, let me just give you one very important message. Any of the strategies you're using for the diabetes control, if that gives you weight gain or hypoglycemia or rise in the LDL, is not acceptable. And that's what happened with the cord trial. So 90%, 1% of the glycoside MR-based regimen, they start with the glycoside MR, so you kick off with the gluco-centric effect, and maybe you don't need a cardiovascular effect. So the renal events, again, on the same one, there was a new one. You can see here the new microalbumin, urea, new microalbumin, and worsening of the nephropathy was about 21%. So very impressive renal benefit as well. And this is the trial, you must have seen it, the same. The major microvascular events were markedly down. And you can see in the macrovascular, just towards the tail end, the jaw of the crocodile are just opening up. And if the trial was left on, like the advance on, I think they had a significant macrovascular benefit as well. So glycoside-based therapy is significant reduction in renal events, micro and macroalbumin, and new worsening. So if you have a patient who has uncontrolled diabetes, cardiovascular, and renal involvement, I can assure you that you can actually very safely use these patients onto the sulfonylurea, which is basically is going to be glycoside MR. So the key findings, advanced glucose control arm, again, was the same, that the renal benefits were there. So I'll race you through this thing because of the limitation of time. How early is early to treat diabetes or stop diabetes? This is what happens in Pakistan and all over the world. The legacy of the bad metabolic memory. You leave your HbA1c for many, many years, and then you start doing tawbah, and then you start to look into your complications, and then you say, this time now I'm going to. So the message here is, please, once you're diagnosed, start to control your diabetes as early as possible with the other cofactor if it's there. So moving forward at the right time, adding other oral agents or insulin on time. And this is the ADA 2020 glycemic control is still the priority. And that is extremely, if you are looking into your blood pressure, cholesterol, and not looking into your glucose control, I think you're going to lose the game. There must be some difference of opinion. I'm sorry I have to race through because I've been given the 15 minutes, I'm almost done. So there would be difference of opinion. The bottom line is this. The general target at HbA1 level should be less than 7, but it is individualized, and the patient additional cardiovascular risk factors should be looked into. Patients who have not had type 2 diabetes for long and who do not have established atherosclerotic disease might have the cardiovascular benefit from intensive glucose control. So if you have right from the beginning the glucose control with no other cofactors, I don't think so there is anything that you need. And we must encourage patients to have the lifestyle management, stop smoking, dietary and physical counseling. and most importantly, early and safely. The word early and safely, you walk away from here and that's the message. And that is what it is. It's the time. You miss the boat. It's not like one of the lectures I said, Surah Tahrim. Inna alladhina amanu tuba lahum. I think it's Surah Tahrim. कि अगर तुम मरने से पहले सच्ची तौबा करो तो अल्लाह तुम्हारे गुनाह माफ़. But this disease will not let you go. This will basically bring you down. So the message here is, must pick up diabetes early and intensive according to, and get ready, or you get ready to pay the price. And the price is cost of substandard, delayed, and suboptimal diabetes care could be really giving you a lot of issues, macrovascular to the macrovascular thing. So, surely avoidable miseries in life. And with this, I think I'm just 2 minutes up or 3 minutes. So, there you go. Okay. So, thank you so much. What I've tried to say to you is that sulfonylureas are out, generally speaking, but not all the sulfonylureas. And when, obviously, because of the limitation time, I couldn't really go into the details, but I think the glycoside MR, and I personally use it as well, even when the patients are actually having the renal involvement, and I think it gives you quite a bit of beneficial effect. So thank you so much. Thank you.